Hi everyone, Alexa Donne here, and today I am coming at you with 7 misconceptions about YA that I hate. These are things I hear over and over and over again from people who just have the wrong idea about young adult literature, both as a genre and, from a writing perspective, writing and publishing perspective. So I just really wanted to talk about my feelings about these things and debunk these myths. The first misconception about YA that I hear all the time is that there's no cursing in YA, no dirty language in young adult fiction, and that's just not true. A lot of teenagers curse or use stronger language, and thus you can totally have stronger language in YA. Now, it is worth mentioning there is a subcategory of young adult fiction that is called clean reads. This also ties into the next misconception I'm going to be talking about, but yes, there's a subcategory where there is no cursing and no sex, which is the next thing, but that doesn't mean that all YA doesn't have cursing. You can definitely use the F word and you can say shit and all sorts of stuff in YA. You might want to use some of these things sparingly in YA. If everyone's dropping F-bombs every other second, that is in some cases going to kind of limit your book. It would definitely have to be upper YA and it can limit your market potential, but you don't have to have a moratorium on curse words in YA. So the second misconception, the big one, is there's no sex in YA fiction. Again, simply not true. There can definitely be sex in YA. There is sex in a lot of YA. What there isn't is graphic sex in YA, explicit sex. Young adult fiction, of course, is not erotica, so you're not going to see, blow for blow description of, I don't know, body parts, or, you're not gonna get that really graphic visual, but you can definitely have sex in YA. You can have on the page sex in YA. It's all about how you write it or how it is written. There are plenty of YA books that have characters who are sexually active, they have sex on the page, and of course there is the popular fade to black trope in YA, which is also totally fine. Even when it's used, it still means there's sex in the book. There's mention of sex. Sex is an idea that exists. YA books as a genre don't ignore sex as a thing that is real that many teenagers have to deal with. Now, again, clean reads is a thing. There is a subgenre, a subcategory within YA where it is clean, which means there is no sex. And of course there is an audience for that and a readership, but it is a misconception that YA equals no sex. Simply not true. The third misconception about YA is that YA can't be dark. That YA, by its very definition, is basically not as dark or violent or serious as adult fiction, and again, just not true. Have you heard of a little book called The Hunger Games? This is literally a book about children who murder each other. I think that's pretty dark. Now, it's not dark in terms of on the page descriptions of teenagers hacking each other up with, long paragraphs about blood and gore and what it feels like to gore someone with a hunting knife. It's not that kind of book. And again, much like sex, it's all about how it is written. YA can definitely be dark. It contains a lot of dark themes. My favorite YA books are pretty dark, but the key is they're not graphic or, kind of over the top with their darkness. Because I will say a key defining feature of young adult fiction tends to be that YA books leave you with some hope. Hope, I consider, a key aspect of the genre. So thus, even the darkest YA books are going to have a flicker or spark of hope. But trust me, YA can definitely get dark. Get ready, guys, because we're about to get into the key misconceptions about writing YA that really frost my cupcakes. And the big one, the fourth misconception, is that YA is dumbed down, that the writing is simple, and thus that YA is not as good or as literary or doesn't have the same merit as adult fiction. People who say this always are not well read in YA. If they've ever read a YA book, they've read certain YA books that are big and commercial and splashy, that are great stories, but admittedly don't have the most elevated prose in the universe. And that's okay. One of the things I like about YA is that you do find a wide variety of writing styles and kind of caliber of writing, which I'll say is also the case in adult, by the way. There's so many subgenres of adult where you don't have to be, a Pulitzer Prize winning writer to write a good story, but I digress. So often the people who think that YA is dumbed down writing or simple because it's for teens haven't actually read a lot of YA. Some of the most gifted writing, the best prose, the most complex ideas I have seen on the page have been in YA. People don't give young readers, and especially teens, enough credit. Teens can handle a lot of things, and teens can definitely handle elevated writing. Moreover, at least 70% of readers of YA are adults, so it's just not true. I really don't like how people look down on YA like it's lesser because it is intended for a teen audience or it is about teens. That's just a misrepresentation of YA in general and the people who write and read it. Two people I always recommend that people check out when they drop this misconception about YA is Laini Taylor and Nova Ren Suma. These are two YA authors who I think have some of the most gorgeous, elevated, complex prose in the business. YA is not simple, it is definitely not dumbed down. And the fifth misconception ties into this, that people think YA is easier to write because it is more simple and dumbed down. Again, not true. And because of the intended audience, that it is for teens. People think they can sit down and vomit out a book and it's gonna be amazing and so easy to write. It's just not. Writing any novel is hard, including and especially YA, or even if we're thinking about middle grade and children's books kind of scaling down. They're not easier because they're shorter or because their intended audience is younger. Actually, younger readers are a lot more savvy. It's a lot harder to kind of pull one over on a younger reader, especially a teenager, because a teenager can sniff bullshit from a mile away, and they're not going to take your kind of this genre is dumb book seriously. Trust me, YA is definitely not easier to write. You have to, deeply understand the conventions of this marketing category, because YA is a marketing category. You have to understand the voice and the tone and what works in YA in order to write it and to write it well. The sixth misconception again carries right off of that fifth one, which is that therefore YA is also easier to sell because it's such a buzzy, hot category. We hear about it so much. There are these huge YA books and so many people seem to be writing it. It can't be that hard. It's just not true. Now, while YA had a massive boom that started about 10 years ago thanks to Twilight, and of course, for a while there, I will admit, YA was easier to sell. That is no longer the case, and that is because the market is super saturated. Publishers who saw, oh my gosh, look, there's this huge appetite for YA, these books are great. The people who love YA actually buy books. YA has single-handedly kept many publishers in business. But the thing is, everyone therefore decided we're gonna go all in on YA, and more people were writing it. They're just fantastic books, so many great writers. And then YA started hitting a saturation point. I can't say specifically when it did, but it was definitely a couple years ago, and it has become increasingly harder to sell a YA because there's so much of it, there's so much to choose from, and it's diminishing returns for the publishers. That actually means your YA book has to be better than ever. This is why it really doesn't serve you to think the misconception that it's easier to write or that it's dumbed down or simple writing. You gotta bring your A game to YA literature to even have a hoped chance in hell of getting an agent and getting a publishing deal. It's really hard to do. You gotta respect the genre to write the genre. Which brings me to the seventh and final misconception, which is you can get rich from writing YA. Again, this carries off of the it's easier to write, it's easier to sell, and I'm gonna get rich. It's just not true. Of course, there's a kernel of truth here. Now, overall, YA book deals tend to pay higher advances than a lot of other genres, especially, anecdotally, definitely more than, say, adult sci-fi. However, big caveat, the average advance for YA, just like the average advance for any book deal, is still much lower than you think it is. Like between $10,000 and $15,000, and that might even be a little bit generous. Also, the days of the massive six-figure book deal for YA are slowly but surely waning. It is true, it used to be more the norm. Still never like the norm for everyone, but it used to be more common for YA books to get massive six-figure book deals. And it remains that those are the ones that you're always going to hear about. The splashy, huge book deals are the ones that get reported in the news the most. They're the ones that you hear about on Twitter. They're the ones where someone does a blog post about their book deal and they talk about their 5-house auction and their major deal. Major deal means like more than $500,000. Those are the ones that you hear the most about. You don't hear about everyone else, the vast majority, who are simply not getting those kinds of advances on YA. It is increasingly more and more difficult, if not impossible, to make a full-time living to get rich off of writing YA. Again, it really has to be a labor of love. You have to love young adult fiction. You have to read a ton of it, respect the genre, work hard on your book because you want to write YA, and then hope for the best. It's definitely not a get-rich-quick scheme. So that's it. Those are the top 7 misconceptions about YA that I really hate. Mostly misconceptions about writing and publishing YA, though a couple of those are reader misconceptions as well. Let me know down below in the comments, what are your favorite, and by favorite I mean least favorite, misconceptions about YA fiction? Come on, we've all heard a lot of them. YA tends to be a genre that people love to shit on because, ooh, it's mostly women, it's mostly for girls, and who doesn't love shitting on things that are by women and for girls? So I know you're gonna come up with some good ones. Drop them below. Let the rage fire ignite, and I'll commiserate with you in the comments over those misconceptions. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, I post new videos 2 to 3 times a week all about YA, writing it and reading it, the industry, getting published, and so on. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. It lets me know you want to see more content like this where I, give you lists of things that drive me crazy. I do enjoy making them. Again, thank you so much for watching, everyone, and as always, happy writing.